Hello guys, this is Rito here, and today we're taking another look at some Warcry cards. So, while I'm working on a bit of a bigger project concerning ability of certain warbands to one-shot chaff models, which someone said would be kind of interesting to look at, and it might be important as well. We are taking a look at twist cards in the meantime. So, kind of like with the victory conditions, I've split the twist cards, there's 36 of them in total, up into different categories. So in general, there's three big categories. Twist cards that nerf something, so that make something worse. For example, you'd say, hey, they take away 1 point of strength for all attacks. That would be a nerf to damage, obviously. Then there's abilities that buff something, so like that would be the opposite. All attacks get +1 damage or +1 whatever, +1 attack. That would be a buff. And then we've got a couple of extra things that are neither nerfs nor buffs, which are additional abilities you can use. Just a card that tells you to take more twists. Then obviously the chaotic beasts, because there's 6 cards in there that will tell you to place chaotic beasts on the table. And then there's 2 cards that will make basically the terrain more hazardous, so people can just take damage. So there's the blizzard that makes you take damage if you don't move, and there's the I think it's like the strong wind or something that sorry, let me check what it exactly says. Right, so whenever you end your movement within 1 inch of terrain, you have a chance of taking damage. That's what that is. So those are these 2. Anyways, so I think this is very interesting just because we can see that these are not spread evenly at all. Looking at the nerfs first, we see that there's a heavy nerf on shooting by twists. So what are these? Mostly they hamper range. So there's things like middle of the night, which allows you to only ever attack enemies 3 inches away from you. That's the most limiting one. But there's also others like Nightfall, where you start off with 12-inch range and then it becomes less every turn, and you've got the other one where you start off with the low range and it becomes bigger every turn, and so on. So there's quite a few. There's 6 cards out of 36, so 1 in 6 cards is going to nerf your shooting. There's 2 cards which will impact your abilities. So like take away priority dice and so on, or lower the value of abilities. There's only 1 that is bad to melee damage, so there's only 1 that takes away strength, and then there's 2 that limit movement. However, what I should point out, both of these do not hamper movement of flying models, so this would suggest that flight is even more valuable, as movement can be hampered by twist cards, but flight cannot. So also something to keep in mind there. Then we've got shooting gets no buffs. There's no card that will actually improve shooting. There's 4 cards that improve abilities, so like giving you extra wild dice, increasing the value of your abilities, and so on. 4 that buff damage in comparison to 1 that nerfs it, so you can see there's a big difference there. So you're much more likely to get your damage buffed in melee than you are to get your damage nerfed in melee. So damage buffs like +1 strength, and the blood wind, which will add +1 to attacks and strength whenever you are wounded, and so on. So quite a few damage buffs here. Then we've got survivability. I think it's just add 1 toughness to all fighters. Then we've got 1 that buffs movement. Again, in comparison to the 2 that hamper movement, it's a bit worse, but kind of balanced there. And then, as I said, we've got these extra ones. I think what's most interesting here are definitely these, because they might impact how we have to value different aspects of the game. So if we're going to say, hey, shooting is very important and shooting's powerful, we also have to keep in mind that in 1 and 6 out of our games, so like every 6th game we play basically, our shooting is going to be severely limited. So if you're playing a tournament with 5 games on a day, for example, like you have a tournament and you play 5 games each, that on average you will have one game where shooting is basically useless. So keeping that in mind, this might be very impactful when creating lists and creating and like talking about how competitive they are. So I might have to include this into my tier list in terms of weighting shooting a bit less than I have, because possibly this means that shooting is a lot less reliable than one might think. Kind of the same for abilities. This is actually pretty good for abilities. In general, I would say that this look just means that abilities are more powerful than I rated them. For damage, the same can be said. Although these melee damage things are obviously it gets buffed more, so you're more likely to have buffed melee damage than you are to have nerfed melee damage. However, you do have to keep in mind that in most cases this is going to be good for chaffy warbands. So let's say the twist is add 1 attack to all attacks, to the attack characteristics. That basically means that if you have 5 models who each have like 4 attacks, so say like you're playing Iron Jaws, you have 5 strong models, each of them gets 4 attacks. They all get 5 attacks now. So in a total round, you have 5 attacks more than you had. If you're playing Skaven and you have 12 models, you're getting 12 extra attacks. So this will benefit. So these buffs will, in general, benefit more the lower tier the warbands that have cheaper fighters than those who have expensive fighters. Survivability is kind of the same deal, because if you are one of the warbands that has 5 toughness across the entire warband, it's not going to matter as much if you get 6 toughness. If you are a warband though that has 3 toughness across the board and you suddenly have up to 4 toughness, that's going to make a much bigger impact difference, because many fighters only have strength 3, strength 4, so that's a difference that you will actually notice. Movement, again, as I said, I think it highlights how important flying is. So flying fighters will benefit from these twists here, and well, I mean the buff to movement obviously will benefit anyone. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not sure it has a major impact on how I would rate movement. I still think movement is very important. And yeah, as I said, it might just mean that I have to value flight that tiny bit more, because obviously in 6% of your games, flying models will be unaffected, but non-flying models will not be unaffected. So that's that to keep in mind there. Right, and then with the extras, I don't think this is too important at all, because, for example, the abilities you gain, everyone gains those. I don't know how that would impact the game balance majorly. I don't think it will. Most of these abilities aren't really good anyways. Like, for example, that double to read inscriptions to give you that extra wild dice, maybe on a 6 up. That's so bad. And then, I mean, double twists, obviously, these will just amplify this situation and not change anything else. And then obviously we've got a big pile of beasts cards. Um, those will kind of be, yeah, I don't know, the beast cards. They are like a wild card. I don't think they really, because the beasts are not assigned to either player, they don't really have a big impact on most games, anyways. So I think what's really the biggest takeaway here is that shooting is potentially bad. It says 1 in 6 games. Also, do keep in mind if you do draw a double twist card, you then increase your chances massively of also drawing a shooting card, because say I draw a double twist first, then we're in one in that's one out of my 36 cards gone, and then we have to draw 2 more cards out of the 35 remaining ones. 6 out of those 35 are shooting cards, so picking one shooting card on 2 draws is quite likely. So as I said, I think this really highlights how kind of fickle shooting armies are, and how much more reliable close combat damage is in general. Anyways, guys, I've talked long enough about this. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Goodbye.